Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this.
Right.
It was great. It was perfect. I overcame that challenge and difficulty and just wrote this thing out. But it was nice to unplug, to get away, because then it allowed my brain to be completely just free to focus on what I needed to write.
I love it. I'm gonna put together the Sue timeline. I feel like every conversation we have, you are doing something really cool and exciting. Like I've just watched your trajectory over the past, when did we meet? 2 years ago?
Before I get you to introduce yourself, Stephen, so
Yeah.
we have been following each other's journey since in October 2022. It's now
Yeah.
February 2024, and so much has happened in that timeline. This is your podcast and not my podcast. I'm just
I can
hosting
interview.
it. You are my guest. So give everybody a background.
Who's Stephen Sokolow? So first and foremost, I think that the word that comes to mind is servant leader. I work in senior care. I'm originally from South Florida, born and raised, third generation. And people tell me that I flew the wrong way for the winter. So I'm living in Southern Indiana for the past 9 years with my wife Mimi, and we have 4 kids, but one of them lives in Israel. So our 3 younger ones are here, and our dog. Originally, I work in long-term care. I got into skilled nursing facilities about 9 years ago, but before that, when I lived in South Florida, worked also in long-term care in the assisted living space as well as home health space. Kind of done it all. I've worked in pharmacy as well, and I think that the one common theme, I'm addicted to the space. I really love it. Have a real passion for it. Um, Got into it kind of by mistake, and I tell people the story. It's kind of funny. I was in school at a school called Yeshiva University, an Orthodox Jewish university in New York, and I was home for the summer. And I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, and she had I didn't know it at the time, she had a stroke and aspirated and was on a ventilator for about 6 months. And thank God she came through it. But when it was time to come home, they said, well, she needs to go to rehab. I had no idea what that even was, and went to look at 3 places that they give you a list and go look at them. And I'm like, there's no way that I'm putting my grandmother in any of these places. Pack her up. We're bringing her home. So I ended up sleeping on a couch for 3 years next to her hospital bed and make sure that she doesn't get up in the middle of the night and fall. Taking her to doctors, learning how to feed her through a peg tube till that came out, and just really learning what it was to provide care to somebody that got older and can't take care of themselves anymore. And when it was time to kind of finish off my college degree, I went back at night and finished in what I thought was the easiest possible thing to get a bachelor's degree in at the time, which was healthcare administration. And that was definitely very far off the path of what I was in school for earlier. As any nice Jewish boy, either you're a doctor, lawyer, accountant, something like that. I was pre-med, and that had kind of gone out the window. I just got a view of healthcare that was, I don't want to say ugly, but definitely more real life than sitting in a biology or chemistry class in college. And ended up going and finishing my last 2 years at a school. And so from there, I got a degree in healthcare administration, never ever thinking that I would need it. And when the market I was working in real estate actually, and when the market crashed in 2007, South Florida was the epicenter of that crash. We were selling pre-construction, buy it on Monday, they're flipping it on Wednesday, have a third buyer on Friday type of deal. And I transitioned to working for a company called Marcus Millichap, selling commercial real estate, learning how to underwrite, learning how to sell larger deals, and went about 2 years without a paycheck. And my wife had our second child, and she's like, you need to go get a job. So I'm like, what do you mean? So just so happened that a friend of mine had purchased 3 assisted living facilities. He had no idea that I had this background or this degree, which is pretty valuable in the healthcare world, in healthcare administration. And he's like, you shouldn't be in real estate. You should be in in healthcare, and I got licensed fairly quickly, and I took over my first 90-bed assisted living in North Miami Beach. It was a turnaround on a regulatory side, turnaround on a cosmetic side. It was a real education very quickly. Really, I guess the skill set was being able to put your name on the line and say, listen, I acknowledge what's going on here. I didn't create the problems. I'm here to fix them. And learning how to communicate with angry family members and residents that come from all different types of backgrounds that don't want to be in a facility, learning how to run a team, build systems, build processes. So that was my first stab at a turnaround healthcare facility. And from there went to home healthcare. So it was a different skill at that time. It was learning how to remotely manage a skilled workforce. You're dealing with LPNs and RNs and CNAs going to people's homes. Also customer service based because they're going to call and say, well, so and so didn't show up on time, or they came and they were rude, or so learned a different skill set. And then after that, I kind of took what I call a hiatus from the work world. I had always wanted to move to Israel. My wife was crazy enough to go along with my idea, and we always had a dream of living in Israel. So we took our four young children and picked up and moved to Israel. And we were there for almost 4 years and loved it, but definitely struggled to try to figure out how to integrate culturally and professionally into society there. And after that, we came back. First place I landed a job was here in South Bend. I had never heard of South Bend. We were coming back, starting from scratch. Literally, we slept on our floor for the first 3 or 4 months. We were starting our financial lives from scratch again. And then I got my first opportunity in with a pharmacy, and that moved into administrator. And again, I found myself back in these turnaround facilities. And I've just kind of, I guess, the past 9 years have spent what I call a reverse American dream story. We came back with nothing, literally probably less than $300 in our pocket, sleeping on the floor, and went from an administrator in training to an administrator to a regional to a chief operating officer. And in May, I started my own company called Azamra Healthcare. We manage two facilities out in Montana. So I commute from South Bend, Indiana, one small black hole, to Montana, a big black hole, at least travel wise. It's a wonderful state. At 1.2 million people. There's more cattle there than there are people, believe it or not. Just loving life. Our kids now, my oldest is married. He's 24, living in Israel with his wife Miriam. And we have a 16, two boys and two girls, 16, and then 15 and 13. So
Wow. Oh my God,
yeah,
that's an amazing story. Laced in all of that. First of all, I'm guessing it's what, like a 25-year time span that you just covered in your story,
yeah.
20-30 year time span. Yeah. What was most surprising about all of those experiences? And couple that with like whether or not you were fearful, or are you ambitious, or did you just kind of go head first? Because I know there's two questions in there. All of it kind of happened, like it just kind of like fell into place for you. It seemed natural. But then the second is to bounce from one thing to another that seems totally different, and then also to move your family to Israel. I mean, that's a big deal, to pick up and do that. So
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because I talk with my wife about this a lot now, and seeing our older son married now in his 20s. And I'll tell my wife, I can't believe he's doing this or that. Nothing bad, but she'll tell me, you did a lot crazier things. So in terms of fear, I think that being raised by a single mom, I'm the middle child. I have an older brother and a younger sister. I think the word is necessity. So when I took that for my first facility over, I literally had no idea what I was doing. I walked in, and you manage a team of anywhere between 8 to 12 people, your immediate management team. And then additionally to that, usually it's about 50 to 60 for a facility that size, like all the nurses, CNAs, maintenance, everyone. And I told them one thing. I said, I will work as hard as you. I'll never ask you to do anything I won't do myself. I'm new. I have a lot to learn. I'm sure that you can teach me a lot. I'm here to lead, but your mistakes are mine. So I said, I take responsibility for your mistakes, and you can have the successes. And I said to them, my philosophy for leadership was one in which I never want to see somebody, if you look at, you want to call it a chain of command, because in healthcare it's very structure oriented. And I said, I never want to see somebody that, let's say, if they start out as a CNA, in 5 years, I want to see you either as a manager, or I want you to have your LPN or your RN license. I want to see you as a nurse, because I said, if that doesn't happen, then I believe my style of leadership has not been successful. So I think in terms of fear, there was no choice, meaning I have to succeed at this role if I want to get a paycheck.
Yeah, right.
So I managed to put my fear aside and say, okay, I'm coming in here. How can we make this work? So when we picked up and we moved to Israel as well, it was just it wasn't a spur of the moment decision, but it was more based on a younger ideology, I guess, led by religious belief on how we feel about the land of Israel. But I think that the learning experience really, I took a lot away from it in terms of what your question was, fear. So when we came back to the United States, I think one thing that I had taken for granted, being raised in the United States and born here, is the opportunity that presented to an American citizen, which is opportunity. And we always learn about it in books and we talk about it and we look, but it's more on the idealistic side. It's not in reality.
Right.
And when we came back, I was prepared I said, if I need to go to the beach and push a hot dog stand, I'll do that. And I think that your average American who goes through our school system has a mentality that things are going to be handed to them. And I didn't wait for anybody to hand me anything. I put myself in the path of opportunity. And there was a sense of fear that, like, okay, do I actually have the skill set to do this? Versus let me jump in, and what I don't know, I'll buy a book on, I'll listen to a podcast, or I'll learn it on the job. And I think that the learning on the job part, I always tell people, administrators who've worked under me, I said, if you really want to learn your communities and you want to learn your buildings, you have to do two things. You have to round on every resident every day, because there's a lot of wisdom in our senior care facilities. Just because a lot of these people are infirmed or in bed and they look not like they did out in the community. I said, that person was a postman for 30 years. I'm sure he has a lot of stories to tell you. Or that person was a doctor or a lawyer or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think more than that, the team that they work with, we have a tendency when we work in very structured environments to overlook the lowest person on the totem pole. So I would always talk to the housekeeper, because if I wanted to know why a resident kept falling over, and when I was an administrator, over and over and over again, we couldn't figure out why they're falling, I would speak to the housekeeper, and the housekeeper who was in that room more than the nurse, more than the CNA, most of the times more than the administrator or managers who are, out doing 100 other things or in their office. You have to learn how to develop that relationship with everyone and lead everyone. So I think that fear for myself is overcome with data,
Mm.
arming yourself with information, and then that you can overcome the fear.
Wow. So, Steve, listening to all of that, in all your experiences, you have a deep rooted philosophy and belief system in how you are interacting with people. I mean, I heard you say, like, you walked into your first position overseeing the nursing home, you didn't know what you were doing. And what I hear is your ego was checked at the door. You walked in, you didn't know what you were doing, and you came alongside of everybody and you told them, hey, I'm just as willing to get dirty as you, and I'm willing to put as much work in and take ownership. So, two questions out of that. The first is, how did your organization respond to that type of leadership? And the second is, how did you develop that type of leadership to walk in there and be able to do that? Because not everybody has that. So, what were some things you did?
So I think I'll answer your second question first. I think where I got it from, I was raised by two very strong women, my mother and my grandmother. My parents got divorced. I was 6 years old, but she went to work. My grandmother stepped in to pick us up from school, and we moved in with her, and she went through a divorce herself at the same time from my grandfather. So it was these
Wow.
two women who were doing whatever they needed to do And then it's funny because I find these same very strong qualities in my wife, that she's everything I do, it's a true partnership. She knows my upsides, my downsides, my strengths, my weaknesses, but she's very good at taking my what I perceive as weakness and trying to get me to see it as a strength. I think that, to answer your first question, how I was perceived, like within the organizations. So I was given a lot of leeway, and so any company, I took it very personally. Meaning, if it was 90 residents that I was an administrator of that building, I treated it as if these were my family members. To me, the only thing that was important, my mission was, I've been entrusted to care for people. So I think that, wherever I came in, I always used to give a speech, and I still do. I call it the Superman or Superwoman speech. And I tell people that when you work for me, if I hire you, the way I'm looking at you, and this is the way I want you to look at yourself, is you're Superman or Superwoman. But I said, what does that mean? I said, if I'm hiring you as a cook, you're not a cook. That's just what you're doing right now to care for the people here. You're feeding them. I said, if I hire you as a housekeeper, you might be pushing a cart and it has cleaning stuff on it and you have a broom and a mop, but that's just the details. I said, really what you're doing is you're a caregiver. And I said, if you can get that through your head, now we have what to work with, where I can take you from point A to B to C, because your perception of yourself, it's just the details. Meaning now you can move wherever you want within this field, because what this field is all about is we're caregivers. So I'm the owner of Azamra Healthcare. So what? It has nothing to do with Stephen Sokolow, Azamra Healthcare. Azamra Healthcare, actually, the meaning of Azamra, it's spelled Azamra. It's a very old concept that was written about by a rabbi named Rabbi Nachman well over 200 years ago, where the actual word in Hebrew means "I will sing." I'll sing out. So it's talking about praying, like a person will pray to God, sing out their God's praises. But he kind of reverses the concept, and he says a person needs to find their good points from within to stay away from being sad, because once a person's sad, they can't function, like depression. And he was talking about this before all of our medications nowadays. And he was talking about not just finding your own good points, but finding the good points of those around you and singing about them, talking about them, finding those good points, reinforcing those good points. And I found that concept, in terms of a leadership style, works well. It works well because a lot of people who work in healthcare, um, depending on how you look at nursing homes, depending on how you look at that space, in our country, we don't like talking about hard issues a lot, whether it's end of life, whether it's getting old. Um, but when you have to confront this idea of mortality, so people shy away from it. And I find that a lot of people we recruit into our industry, let's say you take a hospital nurse that was working in ICU or an emergency room, now they're working, and it's usually 1-3, 1-4 staffing ratio. Now you're giving them 1-25. So it's a different mentality. And to try to get them to keep that hustler, go-getter mentality of, you're going to serve these same residents, it's actually a harder job in a nursing home than it is in a hospital. But that's what I want. That's what I want working for me. It's all about mindset. It's all about, like you said, confronting the fear, getting into making yourself vulnerable to what you don't know, to moving along that pathway of what's next and how can I become better? Because if I become better, now I can serve somebody else better.
It's about getting the right people in the right seats as well. But I want to
Yeah.
pull a couple of things out of what you were just talking about. What I wanted to pull out is that you have a deep level of compassion for people. Whether it's the people in the nursing home or whether it's the people you work with. And I want to pull that out, because what I'm hearing is that because of that, and because you care for the people, you want to see them also win as well. The other thing that I loved that you talked about is that you hired somebody to be a cook, but they're not a cook. And it goes back to our identities, how we perceive ourselves. That's how I identify. But really, you're stepping into that role and then you're embodying that role. And I love that you do that for those who work with you. So I enjoy that about you, listening to that. Let's talk about mindset, because I know you've done a lot of work, you've done a lot of coaching. What are your thoughts on your experiences and how those experiences have helped you get to where you are today?
Sure. So I love coaching. I'm a big fan of Jason Drees. I think that I worked with one of his coaches for about a year, and I think that it was very enlightening. It opened my mind to see where I was the only barriers I believe most people have are barriers that they themselves are putting up. That was my walk away. And my second walk away was that my relationship with my wife, I believe she's my best coach. She knows me the best. She knows when she calls BS when she needs to, and she's able to see past when I'm talking from a point of fear or when I am talking from a point of possibilities. And then if it's from a point of possibilities, really we have a very good partnership. I think that sometimes I'm the idealistic one and she's the realist, and sometimes the other way around, depending on the situation. I think that to me, coaching, it was very hard for me for a long time to distinguish the differentiation between am I in a coaching session or am I in a like a therapy session because it
Sometimes
would
they
get very
cross.
yeah they
Sometimes
do
they're the
they
same. Yeah.
yeah they do, and it gave me a new respect for what is the action that you're implementing based on this coaching session today or this coaching session over a month, or what are you doing with it? And I think that there's a lot of coaches out there today, and there's no shortage in our society of self-help, self-development. It's reshaping mindset on many different levels. But I think where I'm at today, it's more about what can I implement today to stay focused on one thing, let's say today or the week or a month or a year, that I can move forward, and what are my challenges. And when I break down those challenges, they're not always, whether let's say it's time, money, it doesn't always come down to that. More often than not, it comes down to, I'll give you a good example. So I recently started, I don't want to say syndicating, but working with investors to pursue larger nursing home deals. So we're talking like 10, 15, $20 million deals. And I use a planner, the one thing, Gary Keller's book, The One Thing. And there's one thing on his calendar that it talks about to do, that if you go back over the course of a year and you look at 365 days, can you tell me that week or that day what you were working on? Your one thing. So I did this exercise and I'm like, I'm all over the place. This is a task list. Like, what is Stephen involved in over 365 days? I have no idea what I'm like reading like another language. So I tried to do this, and I had to put together a pro forma on a $15 million deal. And I had it on my thing. The one thing today Steven's going to do is write pro forma, do pro forma. And I looked and I pushed it off for 3 weeks. And I'm like,
Wow.
what in the world is wrong with me? I know how to do a pro forma. I don't love working with numbers. If you ask my kryptonite, that's it. I always need people smarter than me around me that are better with Excel. I know the numbers, I just don't like Excel. And I said, you know what? I have no more excuses today. I said, I'm doing this today. It took 4 hours and I knocked it out. And I told my wife afterwards, I'm like, this was in my head. This was completely in my head that this was a big task. This was something that I'm weak on. This is something I don't like. But as soon as I took the action, the fear disappeared. The fear wasn't there anymore. It's no, oh, Stephen Sokolow doesn't know how to write performance. No, that's gone. Here's the performa. I'm good at the performa. And whether I was working on a $10 deal or a $10 million deal, the numbers were still, this goes in column A, this goes in column B. And so I think that coaching, I love coaching, but I think that I love coaching with a caveat. I love coaching with that you have to have a concrete takeaway. Go in with, what are you looking to talk about? Jason Drees is wonderful at that. If you listen to any of his stuff, and I know that, you're amazing. You always ask very penetrating questions. I forgot how he words it, but he always used to have, like, at the beginning of this coaching call, this questionnaire, like, where are you stuck? And
Yeah.
he was very good at getting to the bottom of it very quickly and getting you past it. And I think that if the coaching is producing results, great. If not, I would say find another coach. But otherwise, you're in therapy, where it's just
Yeah,
like,
right.
goes on and on and on.
Yeah, it's that moving from theory to action. We can be stuck
Yeah,
in this overanalyzation. I mean, I'm guilty of it as well, where you just overanalyze, analyze, analyze. And you mentioned it, and I'm glad you did, where with writing that performa, that once you got going on it, there was no more fear. Like there was no reason not to keep going. And it took you 4 hours. And I have heard that the fear that paralyzes us actually only rests in the body about 8 to 10 seconds. I was listening to somebody talk about the research behind that fear that we build up inside of us really doesn't last that long. Once we start moving in that direction and doing that thing, it's not really fear anymore, and you can turn fear into excitement. This is the other thing that I found that was fascinating with fear, is that the body's physical response to fear and excitement are the same, produces the same type of response in there. The only thing that's different is how it's perceived. And I thought,
yeah,
wow, that was pretty cool. And the lies we tell ourselves, like we tell ourselves those limiting beliefs and those lies, and debunking them helps. And I
yeah,
think sometimes a good coach does that, a good friend. You mentioned Mimi, your wife, and how she is really good at seeing possibilities versus whether or not you're afraid of doing something. And,
yeah.
that's a gift. That's really a gift because
It
we're not
is.
always
Yeah,
able to see that ourselves. And we're thankful when we have somebody else in our life, whoever that person is, to be able to call out our own BS, as we say, to see that as like you're being afraid of something you don't need to be afraid of. Do you have an example of what that would look like, of something that was a possibility versus a fear? And she looked at it and she said, no, it's one, but the other. I'm just curious.
yeah. I think that this example of when I went out on my own, it's not easy. I mean, commuting to 12-hour commute from South Bend to Great Falls, Montana, and Deer Lodge, Montana. You know, leaving the security of, you're on this path and you're employed, and we have responsibilities and mortgages and kids. And I think that I overanalyzed that decision. I usually approach things from, let me get the problems first and foremost. Let me see the problems. And Mimi is more, she sees the problems as well, but she's quicker on that step. It's yes, these are the problems. These are your top five problems. Now let's look at the opportunity. And I tell her, a lot. I thank God for her every day, and that's not a joke. I mean, I've been blessed to have the women that I have in my life, and she's definitely a godsend to me and our
What
family.
What quality do you think she has that allows her to be able to do that for you?
I think number one, she knows me, I think, better than I know myself. But number two, she, and I use this word lightly, but she has a ruthlessness that she can navigate my complexities in my head that I create sometimes when I approach a problem, and get me extremely focused. And she'll just say, "Well, we'll be talking to you. Stop. Just stop." And she'll start a list and say, okay, here's what we're really talking about.
Yeah.
She could do that on a deal. She can do that on a life decision, like moving to Israel or moving back from Israel, or me commuting to Montana and, leaving her for a few days at a time every other week. So I think that partnership has been amazing. It works really, really well.
Yeah. It sounds like she
So
has the gift of practical objectivity.
yeah,
She she can just look at that situation and then go and attack it. And I do that too, but sometimes the challenge is that you have to take a step back from attacking the problem to helping somebody see that there's a problem to attack and how you can go about it a little differently. So, what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
That's a good one. What important truth? I think the Superman, superwoman, and at least in the private realm, I mean, we have disagreements, my wife and I, but overall, our values are very much aligned. It's about our family, it's about our kids, it's about, being Torah Jews and those values, religious values. But I think in the professional world, it's personal ownership. Do you own that, the care of the person you're giving of yourself to another person? Do you own it, or is it just a job? Are you clocking in? Or are you clocking out? Are you really Superman? Are you really Superwoman? Or are you just looking for a paycheck? So a lot
Yeah.
of people disagree, and it's funny. My wife, we joke around about a lot about it. Over the years, past 9 years, I have people that have followed me around from position to position, and so I once
That's
asked somebody,
loyalty. That's
yeah,
loyalty right there. And
yeah,
they know when they're working for somebody who's really good to work for, because you
yeah,
just don't you're not just giving them the opportunity to receive a paycheck, but you're also caring for them as well, like that holistic view to an employee. I think that's just so important. It's
yeah,
important for employee retention to make them feel like they are cared for as well, whether they're the cook, the cleaner, the nurse, the administrator. Everybody should have that sense of care
yeah.
for them. And
I
how
t
many organizations don't do that, have
yeah.
that culture?
Well, I tell them, I said, you're crazy enough to come and apply to work in long-term care. I said, so you got past the first hurdle. The second hurdle is usually at some point in employment. I said, I'll make you cry, not on purpose. I said, if we get past those two hurdles, that you walk in the door and at some point over the next year, you're going to cry because I said something stupid or I was too passionate. I said, if you get past those two hurdles, we're working together for a long time, because I think that communicating that value proposition of what they're doing for that resident, and number two, how do I make your life better? Because if we can do that together, if you have the resident, the employee, management. So if we can figure out how to be like this, together, and provide value, we'll all benefit.
Yeah, it's great when you care for people like that and you want everybody to win. So it's a winning situation for everybody. If you could go back in time to your younger self and deliver a message, what would it be and why?
I think if I had to go back in time and deliver a message, I would say relax, everything's going to be okay, even though you don't see it. I'm a pretty uptight person most of the time, and I think that I spend too much time, I have up until this point in life, too much time seeing the possible downsides to things and what could happen. A lot due to life experience that,
That could be
just been had.
paralyzing too. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
just knowing that you have the skill set to see it through, and God doesn't give anyone problems that they're not capable of handling, I believe, and you'll be okay.
It's great advice. How much do we realize that we just need to just go forward, you know?
Yeah.
And hindsight's always 2020, isn't it? When you look back and you just didn't realize, oh, I started there, now I'm here. I heard a great quote the other day. Nothing is as permanent as it seems.
Yeah.
You know,
That's I like that. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
nothing is as permanent as it seems. So just because you have this job doesn't mean you're going to do it for the next 20 years. You can choose, you know, everything in life is a choice, isn't it?
I,
You
I
know, and
like that quote also for another reason. I like that quote because, what do we really have? I started using the Calm app to do meditation or breathing exercises every day. And one thing, I didn't understand it for a long time. I've been using it for about a little over a year now. And they take you through this exercise, and you're breathing and deep breaths and
yeah,
relax and all this kind of stuff, and focus on your breath. And they said, get to a point in the breath where you're focusing on right now, each breath. So now this breath is taking you back to now. And so to me, I thought about that a lot. And I think what it really is getting at is nobody knows how much time they have. And so, like, you want to do something with your family, do it. You want to lose weight, do it. You want to take down $100 million deal, do it. Don't
yeah.
wait.
Yeah, you can't change what's happened in the past. You only have this moment, but this moment, what you choose does determine what goes on out there in the future, but you've only got this moment and to embrace it for what it's worth. And how much of us just kind of live life going, like thinking about the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, rather than just planting yourself and being present in the moment. Breath work does that. I've done a lot of studying recently on the importance of breath work and what it does for the brain, what it does for the body, how beneficial it is just to take those deep belly breaths in through the nose,
Have
out
you
through the
done the
nose.
Ryan Kennedy? Have you done
Not
the
yet.
Ryan Kennedy?
I learned
Yeah,
about
he's
Wim
amazing.
Hof. Yeah, I learned about Wim
Yeah.
Hof. So the Wim Hof method, there's three components to it: the cold shower, the breathing, the meditation. I've already done meditation for a while, and gratitude. I think it was really interesting about being grateful and keeping a gratitude journal. And this was the one exercise that switched it for me. So I have been keeping a gratitude journal for, oh gosh, probably over a year now. You list out three things you're grateful for, you meditate on those. What was a turning point for me was a couple of weeks ago. The exercise was to write down what you were grateful for, but then also add why you were grateful for it. Because a gratitude journal can be like, I'm grateful I got up this morning. It's like, okay, I'm grateful I had this conversation with somebody. I'm grateful for my house. And then we stop and we don't go into the why. And
You
what
don't.
really, yeah, you don't. And what really
No, no, no.
flipped it, what?
Yeah.
I mean, what really flipped it for me was I am grateful for this conversation because Stephen opened my eyes to X, Y, and Z that I didn't see before,
I'll
or
tell you what I always love about talking to you. So every conversation that we have, believe it or not, I don't know if you ever go back. I'm sure when you edit this stuff, you listen to it. But what's so fascinating to me is that so you so you're doing this exercise in the journaling and the grateful. I've done those before, but what's interesting, what comes out loud and clear, like if I was interviewing you, right, or just having a conversation. I don't know if you know this about yourself, but when you're talking to somebody else, that level of gratefulness and the why is very, very upfront and center. And I love that about our conversations. You're constantly, at least in my experience with you, very, very grateful for the experiences you're having, the people that you're around. And I think that's why people love talking to you because it's up front and center. You could tell that that's a value of yours in how you communicate. It comes across very clearly.
thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. That's honestly, I don't know if that's something I've always had, but I've felt it more in myself probably within the last year or two as I started my own personal development journey. When I joined Emerge in October 2022,
Yeah.
I realized I needed something to change in my life. So I just dug in really deep to figure out what were those areas that I need to work on, what were those areas that were lacking, what were those ones that weren't desirable. I think all of us personally, it's hard to see where our zone of genius is. It's hard to see those things that just come naturally to us. And I'm going to flip it. That's what I appreciate about talking with you, Stephen, because you see those things that I can't. So I'm just now riding the high and I appreciate the feedback. I'm so grateful for that. And
Uh,
I'm grateful for you too. Our conversations have always been enriching and I enjoy it as well. There's one question I want to flip it back to. What are your thoughts on manifestation and visualization, and how do you use those in your life if you do?
Interesting. So, I know I talk a lot about my wife, but one thing that we're very like religious about is morning coffee. And when I was in coaching, I was also commuting. I had to leave the house fairly early in the morning, and it ate into my morning routine of having coffee with my wife. And when I was talking with the coach, she's like, You're sounding really grouchy. Like, walk me through what's going on." and and it was very funny because she just started laughing in the middle of the call, and I'm like, "What's so funny?" She's like, "You're such a baby." She's like, "What's bothering you is you're not having coffee with your wife in the morning." And so to answer your question, I don't have an official like routine or practice in terms of visualization or manifestation. There's two things. One is that morning coffee with my wife, we're talking about everything. We've done it since our kids are babies. When we were dating, we were just used to just our conversations were such that it was kind of like, I don't want to say a manifestation practice, but we would talk about the future. We would talk about our wants, our desires, what we like, what we don't like. So I believe that that's one. And I think number two, as an Orthodox Jew, we pray 3 times a day. And that relationship with God is extremely vital in terms of not just like opening up a book and saying the words, but having that real like back and I don't want to say back and forth like but in a kind of way, a back and forth where you know I wanna do a 15 million, $20 million nursing home deal and build a large portfolio of praying on that and talking to God about that, and we call that in Judaism hisbodedus. I think that that's a version of what you're asking about of manifestation. But other than that, a lot of my morning routine, I tried the cold showers, but I scream like a young girl. Wake up my house.
There,
You know,
there's a, there's a
yeah.
trick to that. There's a trick to the cold showers.
Tape, tape
No,
your mouth.
no, 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 no. You start a week at 30 seconds, the second week at a minute, the third week at a minute and a half, and the
I
fourth
can't even
week
do
at
10
2.
seconds. At 10
You
seconds,
know
I'm
what?
already
Okay,
screaming.
you want another hack then? Here's another hack. So my podcast producer, who was an actor before he does what he does now, he also teaches acting as well. And he takes cold showers. I'm like, Mark, dude, how do you do that? Right. And he said to me, he said, you know what? He said, pick something that you like to sing, time it. Right. So he's like, anything, whatever it is, time it. And if it's 15 seconds, great. He said, then get in the shower. After you take a hot shower, like after you've done all the things you need to do, then turn it on cold and then sing that for the amount of time. So if you want to stay in the cold for 15 seconds and you know what you're singing is 15 seconds, then, sing it for 15 seconds. What happens is you're tricking your brain. Your brain can't focus on the fact that you're under the cold shower and sing at the same time. So I'm like, okay, I'll try this. No worries. And it was around Christmas time. So it's We Wish You a Merry Christmas. And I timed it. And it was like when I went through what I would sing, that was 15 seconds. So if I sang it twice in the shower, it worked. It absolutely worked. Then I got done. I was like, wow, this is way cool.
Yeah.
But that was the mind hack that he gave me in
Wow.
order to
I
do
gotta
the
try
cold
that.
shower. And it worked.
I'll let you know how that goes.
The funny thing is, and I had heard about it for a while too, and I'm like, oh, this is just BS. Like why would you want to do this stuff? When I did it the first time, and then I came out of the shower, I'm like, wow, that feels great. Like I was just so energized and ready to go that it just did something for the body. And there's lots of research that backs up the cold showers. Now they have the science that backs up all the benefits that come with taking cold showers. And honestly, the benefits can come in as little as 2 minutes. It doesn't
Amazing.
have to be 10 minutes under the shower. You don't have to start there in the cold, but that 2 minutes, when you work yourself up to that, it had physical benefits in the body, which I thought was pretty
Oh, I
cool.
definitely recognize the benefits. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
much
yeah.
more
Yeah.
alert and yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Cold plunge. I don't know if I could get there yet or not, but let's go back for a minute about the visualization and prayer. I wrote down here, prayer is a form of visualization. As you were explaining prayer in your time with God and talking with God and saying, God, I want to do this $30 million deal. And you're actually visualizing that in the form of prayer. So,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I would say that you do visualization. It's just another method, because when we think of visualization, and I've talked to a lot of coaches and people who talk about visualization, you think there's one prescribed way to do it. And if you're not doing it that way, then that's not the right way. And that's can't be further from the truth. I mean, visualization, and in turn, that turns into manifestation. It's what works for you, and it's at the end of the day, it's just activating your reticular activating system to get your brain to see that thing that you want. So whatever method that is, and there's so many out there, and it's
I
just
did use one other one.
Yeah.
Do you remember we talked about the Jason Drees's book, the
Do the
red cover one?
impossible. Yep.
Yeah,
Do
Do
the
the Impossible.
impossible. Awesome book.
Yes, yeah. So he has some really great, the repeat after me's.
Mhm.
I think those are great, and I
Yeah.
still use those.
Yeah, I
I
do
like
too.
that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I did a couple of recordings off of a few of them out of his book because they were
Yeah.
just so good, and just his repeat after me mantras, that verbal component. And then when you couple that with the visual component, it takes that manifestation, it takes that desire for what you want in the future to happen to the next level. And it
Yeah.
opens your eyes to see possibilities too. And it may not actually go the way you wanted it to, but it gets you to see things that you normally didn't see before. So we talked about books. Is there any other books that you would recommend?
I've taken a lot away from it, extreme ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, when you look at, I have a lot of respect for our military and what they do, but especially, special forces, naval SEALs, some of the situations they were in are just, I can't even imagine. But to take that skill set and translate it into the business world, I find very talented because you're trying to get people, and I'm sure their consultant clients are in all different realms, different spaces. Again, it goes back to mindset. If you're coming to work at the supermarket as a cashier, are you approaching your job as like a naval SEAL, like that kind of mindset? Like, I'm going to be the best at what I'm doing. Again, it's just a detail. Today I'm a cashier. Tomorrow I could manage a store. The next day I could own a chain of my own stores. So again, I think it goes back to, they talk a lot about, in the heat of the moment, and obviously they're talking about battle, but slowing it down and realizing that the outcome, even though you're working on a team, the outcome's on you. The cavalry is not coming. Nobody's coming to rescue you. If you're going to succeed, it's on you.
Yeah, I like that battle that you said, and you're right. We don't actually have to be in a real physical battle. I mean, what's a battle to anybody is just a challenge or difficulty in front of them, and then
Yeah.
to take extreme ownership for that thing. I love that. I love that. I ask 3 questions at the end of all my podcasts. That's the first one. The second one generally unpacks a can of worms or opens a Pandora's box, but I love it anyway, so I keep it. What's one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered that question or expanded on the topic?
I think you ask it in a roundabout way, and it has to do with the name of your podcast, Small Step, Big Wins. So I think you asked it in a roundabout way. You got it out of me, but I think that along my journey, at least, and I'm a big fan of your podcast. I've listened to all your episodes. I think you get that out of your guests as well. I think if you would ask it flat out, I'm sure it would overwhelm people. Tell me some small. I mean, you have like big guests on your podcast, not like me, but I like tell me small steps that led to big wins. And I think that, I don't know if it opens Pandora's box. I think that's been a lot of our conversation to this point, which is your mindset. Are you showing up? Are you showing up to where you're at here and now? And do you have a vision of where you want to go?
So, as we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
One small step, I would say commit to learning, meaning listen to as many podcasts as you can. I would listen to all of the episodes of your podcast for sure, but read. There's a lot of good people out there that have been along the same journey that whoever's listening, myself included, are on. When you get to, especially on podcasts, but when you read books, I think that it's presented in a certain way that they're not telling you the crappy side of things. Some of them do. But on a podcast, you can pick up in tonal inflection. You can pick up on the words they're using, the descriptions, the emotions behind it. So I think that find somebody that you connect with and listen, but get practical takeaways. Meaning, if you listen to a podcast, this is something I started a while ago. So just what's the takeaway? Take one takeaway, some actionable step that you're going to implement today, like within an hour of listening to this podcast, that you're going to use.
I love it. I love asking that question at the end because I have just like this library now of what things people can do today to help them change their tomorrow. I think it's great. Stephen,
What's
thank
what's 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 the best answer you've gotten so far?
Oh my gosh, the best answer I've gotten so far. Oh, now you're putting me on the spot because it's the best answer. I have to go back and listen to some of them. A lot of them tend to be, I wouldn't say the same, but like move into action. Take theory and go to action. Go do something. I've had ones on journaling. I've had ones on, I'm trying to remember. You know what? I'm drawing a blank at the
Nice.
moment. Stephen,
Awesome.
how can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
So I'm on Instagram, although I'm not too active. I definitely am on there. They can email me, call me. I don't know if you want to put it in the show notes. You want me to just give my
Yeah, I
phone
will.
number?
You want to
Yeah,
give us however you want people to reach out to
yeah.
you. That works. That works. Well, Stephen, this has been an amazing conversation. I don't know why I'm losing my voice. Thank you for the gift of your
Thank you.
time. This has been, like I said, amazing. I love it. I love it. I love
Thank
it.
you so much, Sue. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.